The world is in crisis. The number of people forcibly displaced by war, conflict, or persecution recently reached a record high of 60 million. That includes over 15 million refugees. All over the world, people are migrating in search of a better life for themselves and for their children. The result is huge population shifts. As of last year, 14% of America's population was foreign-born. It's estimated that over 42% of Sydney, Australia's population is foreign-born. Our demographic landscape is changing dramatically, and we can easily allow the multitude of cultural voices, from political parties to media outlets, drive the way we feel about the world moving from all nations to all nations. As believers, though, the only outside voice we should care about is God's. So what does the Bible say about God's heart for the foreigner? Depending on your Bible translation, you'll see the words aliens, sojourners, foreigners, and strangers over 100 times in Scripture. In Deuteronomy alone, God commands his people to love the foreigner, use tithes to bless the foreigners, assemble with foreigners to listen to God's word, invite foreigners to holidays and feasts, and to take care of the physical needs of foreigners. Why would God issue such commands? Again, Deuteronomy makes it clear, because the Israelites were once foreigners in Egypt, because the Israelites were slaves and God redeemed them, and ultimately so that others could learn to fear the Lord and follow God. God's instructions on this matter go far beyond Deuteronomy, though. Think about the story of Ruth. Ruth was a foreigner from Moab who married a Jewish man who died, leaving her a widow. Culturally, Ruth should have returned to her native land to be reunited with her own family and her own people. Indeed, Naomi, her mother-in-law, encourages her to do just that. But Ruth won't leave. She had been shown so much love and kindness by Naomi that she proclaimed, "Do not urge me to leave you or to return from following you. For where you go, I will go, and where you stay, I will stay. Your people shall be my people, and your God my God." Ruth decided to forsake the beliefs of her own people in order to follow the one true God of Israel. Imagine what could happen if Christians all over the world welcomed, loved, and showed hospitality to the refugees, immigrants, and international students flooding into our countries. We could have a great harvest of people saying, "I want your people to be my people, and your God to be my God." God's concern for the foreigner continues into the New Testament. Which commandments did Jesus proclaim as the greatest? Yep, love God and love your neighbor. He goes on to explain that your neighbor is not the person you expect, but the Samaritan, the foreigner, the one not like you, the one you would normally avoid. Jesus didn't just teach God's love for the foreigner, he demonstrated it by healing Gentile demoniacs, engaging in a spiritual debate with a Samaritan woman at a well, praising the faith of a Roman centurion, and celebrating the Gentile widow from Zarephath who fed Elijah. These were all foreigners, outcasts, strangers. In Acts chapter 2, who were the first people to hear the wonders of God in their own languages at Pentecost? It was the foreigners dwelling in Jerusalem. That's right, the first people to respond to the gospel when the Holy Spirit showed up were the nations living among the Jews. Paul makes God's intentions clear in his sermon at the Areopagus, where he proclaims, "God made from one man every nation of mankind to live on all the face of the earth, having determined allotted periods and the boundaries of their dwelling place, that they should seek God and perhaps feel their way toward him and find him." What if we took that message to heart? What if the movement of peoples all over the world is not something to fear? What if the influx of immigrants, refugees, and international students is in fact a blessing, an opportunity orchestrated by God in order to fulfill the Great Commission? Historically, missions has been focused on leaving your context and going out to reach the nations, and that must continue. But perhaps welcoming is just as strategic in the mission for God to be glorified among every tribe, tongue, people, and nation. And remember, according to Ephesians 2, we were all strangers and foreigners, even enemies to the kingdom, before Jesus made a way for us to be citizens, children, and heirs. Pray, give, go, welcome. Where is God calling you?
So we watched that video to say that God is bringing them to us. And so we have them right in front of us. This concept of reaching the unreached, it starts right here at home. And so tonight we want to look at those things that can create major confusions within cross-cultural communication. Because cross-cultural communication is, at the moment, the biggest hindrance to people understanding the gospel. So in this photo, I have a picture of a little girl. That's, of course, a European, light-skinned, American, Canadian, whatever, blonde-haired, blue-eyed, curly-haired girl standing in the group of a bunch of Indian girls. This is exactly what my daughter looked like when I took her to Asia. And all the kids would just stare at her, and she'd stare back at them, scared to death. Cross-cultural misunderstandings can greatly hinder our ability to preach the gospel. Let me give you an example. My mentor, Jeff Jackson, we would normally have him in class, but his father passed away just like a couple weeks ago, so we're not going to be able to get him this semester. But he's the one that trained me, and he shares a story about when he was teaching this exact class 20 years ago at the Calvary Bible College. And as he was explaining about culture, he knew that he had international students in the room. And there was a young Asian girl that had come from China or somewhere to go to the Calvary Chapel Bible College and then go back to Asia. And so he asked her point blank, and he knew that it was going to be hard for her to speak that way because she doesn't come from that culture, but he wanted the students to hear about what it's like for an international to come into our world. Now, this isn't just into any world. This is coming into a Christian family and to a Bible college. So he said to the young girl, well, she's like 17 or 18, she wasn't too young. He said, has there been anything in your life as you've lived in America and observed all the Americans that's offended you? And sheepishly, with all nervousness, she said, yes, absolutely. And he said, well, tell us about it. And she was totally afraid of it. And he says, listen, in this culture, you can say whatever you want. And she goes, okay, let me tell you my story. And she said, I've been brought into a Christian family, and one of their kids goes to school here with us at Marietta at the Bible College. And so they're hosting me and taking care of me. They're a great family. And Jeff said, well, what have you observed about them? And she said, well, every night when I'm in my room, and they gave me my own room, which is kind of weird for me because I'm used to sleeping with my whole family in one room, and they put me by myself, so I'm already feeling totally isolated. And then I realized mom and dad sleep in that room, and then I sleep in this room, and then there's their son, and then there's their daughter. And every night, one of their kids has a nightmare or something happens, and let's say their daughter has a nightmare, she gets up, she walks into mom and dad's room, mom and dad comfort her and talk to her, pray with her, and then they put her back in a room and they put her back to bed. And Jeff goes, and what's wrong with that? And as she's telling the story, everybody in the room's like, there's nothing wrong with that, right? That's very Western, it's very normal. Well, Jeff understands it in her mind, that's really weird. Then she says, what really struck me is that the dog doesn't sleep downstairs or outside. The dog goes into the parents' room and sleeps at the foot of the bed. And so Jeff said, well, how do you perceive that in your culture? And she says, I perceive that they love their dog more than their kids. Because if they really love their kids, they would let their kids sleep in their room with them. And if they really love me, we would all sleep in the same room together. And all the Americans are like, what's wrong with this girl? It's a cultural misunderstanding, wasn't it? Who was right? Who was wrong? No one. Does the Bible say the family must sleep this way? The family must, arrange their housing this way? No, it's all culture. So cross-cultural misunderstandings can greatly hinder people from hearing the gospel. So here she is wanting to be a Bible college student and learn more about the Lord. And she's looking at a family which should be the model of American Christianity, and they probably were. But in her mind, they love their animals more than their kids, and that is absolutely detestable in her culture. They would never honor a dog above a child. And in no culture overseas would they ever allow dogs to live in their homes the way that we do. I should say in the West we do, but in the East they wouldn't. And maybe if they're becoming a bit more westernized, they might accept it, but most cultures think that's totally insane. You are Jesus' ambassador. And there's a really good chance that you're going to be, your life, the only Bible that people ever read. They'll look at you and they'll say, that's what a Christian is. And if there's a cross-cultural misunderstanding, and if we're not sensitive to their worldview, we've turned them off before we could even say hello. We want to be the Lord's ambassador, but for whatever reason, and oftentimes we don't even know that we're offending them because we're not being sensitive. And so we saw the video about refugees, right? Asylum seekers, international students, people, migrant workers coming to live here to find a better life. And we want the gospel to go into their world, and they shut down before we can even connect with them. In light of this, turn with me to 1 Corinthians chapter 9, verse 22. We're not going to go in detail into 1 Corinthians 9:22. Actually, we're only going to read the last half of it. And in 1 Corinthians 9:22, Paul explains to us the basic concepts of cultural sensitivity, cross-cultural evangelism, and being open and being vulnerable so that we can reach more people. So Paul says, and I'm reading in 1 Corinthians chapter 9, verse 22, the second half, Paul says, I have become all things to all people, that by all means I might save some. So Paul is telling us that he has made a clear choice to do everything he can. Notice the word all. Not I've become some things to some people, that by all means I might save some. I've become all things to all people, that by all means I might save those that God is drawing to himself and those that are willing to hear the gospel. And so in this context, Paul says, I've lost everything. I've lost everything for the sake of the few. We all know that not everybody's going to get saved. You guys follow me on that? There's a wide road and a narrow road. Many and few. Paul says here, I lose everything for the few. Doesn't matter how many there are, I'm willing to die to myself. So we'll look at that at the end of class, but let's lay the foundation of cultural sensitivity from 1 Corinthians 9:22. And then in John, if you want to turn there, if not, it's okay, I'm going to read it to you anyways. In John chapter 13, verses 34 and 35, this is the verse that we bring up in every semester. This is one of those verses that, in a sense, gives us what a Christian should look like, how a Christian should be seen by the outside world. Jesus in John 13 has just got done washing the disciples' feet. They've just finished the Last Supper. They're in the upper room, and he's serving his disciples. And in this service, he's concluded the foot washing. Judas has gone off to betray him. He's seating back at the table, and he says to them, a new commandment I give to you, that you love one another, just as I have loved you. You also are to love one another. And so what's he telling his disciples? He's not giving them another 600 new commandments like Paul, John, Moses. Moses gave them all of the commandments of the Old Testament. Jesus here is clearly saying to them, I'm giving you guys one simple commandment. This commandment will make or break your ability to witness. This is the essence of truly witnessing for the Lord, and that's love one another just as I have loved you, and all people will know that you are my disciples. Read verse 35 with me. By this, all people will know that you are my disciples if you have love one for another. So Jesus has set the bar so high that he said, in the same way that I have loved you, you are to love each other. He's just about to give everything, to be on the cross, not just to be incarnate as a man, not just to live in one of the poorest, most broken countries ever in history during that time, but to go all the way to the cross, receive the wrath of the Father for the sake of the world. And then he's saying to his disciples, as I have done this for you, you do the same for others. Why do we bring this up? Because love is the clearest way to preach the gospel. But if my love is misunderstood, if my love is seen as offensive, then it's no longer love. So it means that it doesn't matter how good of intentions I have. If I communicate love in the wrong way, they will be offended, and they will then turn away and say, they don't love me. Let me give you an example of this. When my wife and I first moved to a refugee camp, we were living in these little grass huts. And there was a Muslim lady that would help out in the area. There was like 4 huts, and the lady would come by sometimes and help us like figure out how to get water, because you had to get water from the well. She would just show us the basic stuff. She kind of just took care of the place, cut the plants and did little things. So as we're living in this hut, she's watching us day by day. And one day, her name was Vicky. That was her English name. She had an Arabic name. One day she came to my wife and she said, Heidi, I want to become a Christian. And Heidi said, what do you mean? And she said, well, I was born and raised a Muslim, but I've been watching your team, this group of 6 Americans. And in watching you, I've seen love that I've never seen anywhere else at any time. And because of that love, I want to follow your God and become like a Christian. And my wife said, wait, but as a Muslim, you're going to lose your family, you're going to lose your parents, you're going to lose everything. And she said, I'm willing to give it up for the love. And then my wife said, but what'd you see us do? What was it that showed you that we loved each other? And she says, your husbands serve you as women. And I've never seen a man serve a woman the way that your husbands serve you. Now, in the African context, there's the husband, right? And this is the value of the community. The husband, the son, the animals like the cows, because they're all shepherds, right? The sheep, then the wife, then the daughter. So they never think of their wife as equal. And many of them have multiple wives. Why? Because they want more sons. So it doesn't matter that they have more wives, they want more sons. One of the ladies that my wife was ministering to, my wife said, how can I pray for you? And she said, I've just become a Christian. This is a different story. I'm sidetracking here. I've just become a Christian, and my husband has brought home a second wife. And I didn't know he was going to do it. He just walked up one day, because he went off to the city, came up one day with a second wife, and he said to me, the first wife, we've been married for 2 years, prepare a meal for us, prepare the bedroom so that we can go have our honeymoon. And my wife's like, what? And she goes, it's totally normal. So as a Christian woman in this society, they have to deal with these things. So there's these women seeing that kind of world as being normal. They look at us as Christians and as Americans, and they said, it's not your words, it's not how you teach or any of that stuff, it's the way you treat each other. So then my wife says to Vicky now, what is it that we did? And she said, you know, every day when the women normally do the laundry, because if men do laundry, it's kind of shameful, it's kind of weird. Like, I can't go and do my laundry if my wife's next to me. All the women will be all offended. Your wife should be doing that. Now, I treat her as an equal, but she has her role, I have my role. We understand that culturally. So my wife is doing laundry. Well, when you've washed a pair of Levi's in an open wash basin, it's grueling. Have you guys ever done it? We're trying to wring out one pair of Levi's, your fingers feel like they're going to fall off. And it's dusty, it's windy, the dirt's pure red. I mean, you're always covered in dirt. And so we're washing our clothes. And so my wife spends the morning washing the clothes. She hangs them up on the laundry line. And then she leaves to go out and do ministry with the other ladies. I'm back in the hut, and I can hear this huge rainstorm coming. Every day in the tropics, it rains heavy right about 11 a.m. until about 1 p.m. Somewhere around there, there's a 1 hour like deluge. We're talking more water than you've ever seen in Southern California in 10 years put together in one afternoon. That's how much we would get. So I hear this wall of water coming towards us, and it sounds like 1,000 horses, running at full speed. So I hear the noise. I go outside, I grab the laundry off the laundry line, because if I don't, all the mud will splash up and ruin what she did that morning. I bring it in the hut, I hang it up on our inside laundry line, because you always have an outward and an inward because of the rain. I wait for the rain to go past, then I go back outside and I hang up the laundry, and then my wife comes home hours later. So this goes on every day. I don't think anything of it. I have no idea this is the entrance to the gospel in this community. Vicky says to my wife, I've seen your husband and other husbands. I wasn't the only one. We would all do this. This is common courtesy. I see your husbands go out and take the laundry off the laundry line, put it inside, and put it back outside. Inside and outside, I'm convinced your love is beyond anything I've ever known. I want to give my life to Jesus. Like, what? That was it? That was it? You see, we were living in a fishbowl, and we had no idea. We thought it was going to be like this great evangelistic moment, and the Holy Spirit fell, and I spoke in a new language, right? No. Love one another as I have loved you, and by this love, all men, all people, the world will know that you represent me. So cross-cultural misunderstandings can mess that up. really bad because I could have been doing something to or with my wife in front of them, and they would have thought like that was demeaning, where I didn't think it was demeaning, but to them it might have been. So praise the Lord for nationals that come alongside us and say, when you're here, do this. When you're here, don't do that, because unless they tell me, I will make all those mistakes. So we are so thankful that God gave us the grace to do what wasn't offensive so people could start getting saved. That Bible study went from one lady, the Muslim lady, to 2 people the next week, to 10 people the week after, to 20 people within about a month. One of the ladies in the Bible study was this old lady, and she was really, what those certain older relatives that we have that kind of speak their mind and say whatever they want? Well, she was one of those kind of girls. They actually called her young lady as a joke. So her name was Inyaka, which meant little girl, but she was really like 80 years old. But she's probably 60, but she looked like she was 80 because she'd been a refugee her whole life. My wife said to Inyaka, tell me about your testimony, because they all don't speak the same language. We've got 5 languages going on in this refugee camp. So my wife doesn't speak her language. So through the translator, she says, tell me your testimony. And she said, well, you started this Bible study, and girls from this Bible study got so excited about the Word of God that they were learning. Between women, and another cultural thing, women rarely learn the Word. So my wife said, I'm going to pour into these ladies. So these ladies are like, we're hearing the Word and learning the Word for the first time. So they go out in groups of 2 or 3 to the whole community. And they knew that Inyaka was a witch doctor. And every night, somebody would bring a sick child to the witch doctor, Inyaka, with a chicken, and they would kill the chicken and sprinkle the blood and do this whole seance thing to try to heal the child. It's a normal thing in a voodoo culture. And so Inyaka's doing this day and night, dancing to demons, dealing with demonic possession. These girls come, they preach the gospel to her, she gets born again, she gets totally changed, she joins my wife's Bible study, and my wife has no idea that she's got a former Muslim, a former this, a former witch doctor. Why? Because we did laundry for each other, and we lived amongst them, and we were as sensitive as we possibly could, and God began to do a revival without us even knowing it. It was all happening in the background, but it truly hinged on love and simplicity and sensitivity. All right, I have a second video I want to show you. This is a video of the worst missionary ever. If you've been in my class before, you've seen this. We show it in level 1, level 2, and level 3 so that nobody ever forgets. Don't be a Viking. Paul, the apostle, said very clearly, I've become all things to all people. I go to a culture, I learn, I adapt. We are like the Vikings as Westerners. We're wealthy, we're powerful, we have ideas, and we feel like we can come in and take over. So don't be the epic failure, be more like Paul the Apostle.
I am Svart, son of Skop, of the house of Sklood. We come from a land far beyond the great sea. We have heard that this is a place of great darkness, of frail, powerless people. We have come to help. The people of this realm have many problems. Most of them are bewitched by these small, flat magic stones. It's really quite sad. The men don't work. There's no pillaging, no plundering, no marauding. They just sit, enslaved by these strange glowing devices, forced to endlessly tap, 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 over and over. It's a meaningless existence. Breaks your heart. Be free! Be free, my brothers! When you can help someone less fortunate than you, there's no better feeling. It's why we came. They need to learn a better way. Our way. They need help with things that just seem so basic to us. These poor, wretched urchins are starving. Act like you like it, don't embarrass them. This is what passes for a meal here. This, a meal. We can help.
What is that?
Seal blubber. She's moved to tears. You see how great the meat is here? Delicious. Look at this guy. So cute, but so weak. He should be able to take down a full-grown whale by now. We do this thing called VBS. It's been a huge success. The kids love Viking Battle School. Look at these rags. These people are truly destitute. How will this in battle ever stop a halberd from spilling their innards? That's why we've handed out over 100 Brynja. Just look at them. They've never seen such nice clothing. We've accomplished so much in just a few days. We helped someone who couldn't get his horseless cart to go. We've taught them better ways to use their unusually small fields. And as on most of these trips, lots of painting. These guys literally have no idea how to discourage their enemies from attacking. This has been an amazing trip, and look how happy they are. They just love us so much. And just because we are vastly superior to them in every possible way, doesn't mean that we haven't gotten as much as we've given. When we can bless them with the simple things that we take for granted, it makes you feel good.
Wow. Thanks for the catapult.
So the title of the movie is Acts of Kindness, like battle acts of kindness. It's absolutely hilarious. So often we go into a place and that's the way that we feel. That's the way we think. We're going to come in, we're going to remove all those things that we think are wrong about the culture, and we're going to insert all of our greatness to them. Now, imagine coming to our culture here in America, like the Vikings are, and seeing all these people on their iPhones just staring at them. Like a group of like 5 or 10, young people, and no one's talking. They're just staring at their phones. Wouldn't you think these people are bewitched by these flat magic stones? Wouldn't you just want to sometimes just break them? You're like, what's wrong with you people? Right? It's really what's going on. So they're speaking of very clear things. These men just tap on keyboards all day. I went from living in a refugee camp in the middle of nowhere with people that just did farming, and we walked and we were in the open sky. I come back to America after giving the ministry to the Africans, and my pastor says, "You're the missions pastor. There's a box, a room, of course, painted white with a window. There's a box, there's a keyboard, there's a monitor. Now walk with God." And I'm like, what is this? I don't even know how to function like this. Of course, and I'm typing with, 2 fingers, hunting and pecking at the fastest rate that I can. I almost went nuts. I had to literally get out and go meet with people because I couldn't handle the Western way. So we can think that our culture is perfect. We go to another culture, we think that culture is perfect. We come back to our culture, we think our culture is all messed up. It's all about what you're used to. So the missionary has to be sensitive to what the people are used to. Jesus lived in so many different ways than we do today that we need to realize he was not a Westerner. All right. With that said, we have to review, I think I have 4 rules when it comes down to cross-cultural interaction. Rule number 1 in cross-cultural interaction, they will never try to offend you, or in other words, they will always try to honor you and not offend you. Whatever somebody says cross-culturally, whatever somebody does, 99% of the time, they're trying to show you honor, because they come from a very hospitable society. They come from a society where to even show a sense of dishonor to somebody they know well is considered taboo. To show a dishonor to somebody that they're just meeting, they wouldn't even think of it. Even if they hate you, they'll speak kind things to you. But if you perceive what they're saying as unkind, you're wrong every time. They will always try to honor you and never offend you. We'll have some really fun times looking at this. Rule number 2, you should try not to judge them. Whatever happens, whatever they say, just say, I don't understand it, and I won't create a judgment based on the way I interpret it, because my interpretation most often is wrong. So I can't see somebody do something and then judge them for it. Let's take, for example, the international student that's living in a Christian's home. She judged that those parents love their dog more than their kids because she simply misunderstood. We will go into her culture and misunderstand just like she misunderstands our culture. So we leave judgment totally out. Judgment can come in like a year or 2 years after living there. Then you can say, because you've talked to a ton of people, you've interacted with them, then you can say, you know what, that is ungodly, because you understand the root of it. But up front, within that first week, within that first month, no judgment whatsoever, because normally you don't understand. So when you do judge, you harden your heart. God wants you to be an ambassador to them, but now you've built up this glass wall between you and them because they've offended you culturally, and you judge them that they're either sinful or that, the worst, they're not redeemable. Many times missionaries have gone into deep cultures, and you're reading the book Peace Child, where these guys are headhunters. Can you imagine entering a headhunter culture and saying what? They're not even able to be redeemed because these guys are so wicked. We must always say, I don't understand why, I don't understand how, I don't understand when it's going to happen, but I know that it's something that's outside of my understanding at the moment. So we don't judge them. Rule number 3, try to always keep a straight face. When you enter into somebody's home, or you're in a situation and you see something shocking, which will be on a daily basis, don't show it on your face. This great doctor, Dr. Chris. Now, Dr. Chris was no joke. He was at least 6'6", 6'10". He was this huge guy, and his shoulders were as wide as the door. All of my Sudanese refugees are these thin people. So Dr. Chris by himself was the biggest white man they had ever seen or ever experienced. And Chris was very emotional and very expressive. So I told him right up front, Chris, you're coming here as a doctor, and he was a brilliant internal medicines guy. Like, he understood if you take that medication with that medication, it will mess up this part of your body, and long term it will affect that. He was one of those guys that everything that's going on, he's analyzing it. He was so brilliant. When he would talk, I would tell him, I don't understand what you're saying. I have no idea about what you're talking about. I would need a medical degree just to understand his first sentence. And he'll go on for hours. He's one of those kind of guys, right? So he's analyzing everything, and he's really emotional about it. And I said, you've come to minister to the poorest people on the planet. Our medical clinic is the worst clinic you'll ever see. They barely have Band-Aids, they barely have peroxide. They will do and say things that will shock you, but you've got to keep a straight face. And he goes, okay, I can do it. And I'm thinking, Lord, help Chris. Chris walks in the first day. And remember, he's this monster of a guy. Not because, right, he wants to be. He's just born as this huge framed guy. He walks in, they're all like, who's the huge white man? Chris looks over and he sees a child that had been cut with a rusty razor blade, because the witch doctors tell the mom, if the child has a problem, you cut around that infection with the rusty razor blade and you stuff herbs into it. Well, what's happening to the child? The child's getting more infection from the rusty razor blade, but they've never had microscopes. They don't understand microbiology. They have no idea. So Chris walks in, he sees this, and he says, Rob, what is that? And I said, well, don't show any emotion, but the witch doctor did that to the child. The child had one little issue, and that issue is now grown into this massive thing. And Chris goes, what? You're serious? That's not really happening? I'm like, don't yell. Whatever you do, don't yell. It's a shame and honor culture. You got to calm down. We turn the corner, and he's like, no way, look at that. Look at that. He just, calm down. Why? Because these things are shocking to us. He came to help, but because of his emotions, they were offended by him. Now, the next day, he did way better. But I knew that first day was going to be overwhelming. We all do it. So what's the rule? Straight face. If they offend you, don't get all upset. If they say something that you think might be funny, but nobody else is laughing, don't laugh, right? Don't be the only one in the room that's laughing. Keep a straight face. And then when everybody else laughs, then join in on laughter. We've all had Asians with us in America where they don't know that it's a joke, and then they hear us laugh, and then like 10 seconds later they're all, oh, ha, ha, ha. You guys have all seen it? They're trying to figure out what we're laughing about. It's the same for us when we go into their culture. So straight face, keep your emotions the same as the people. That's rule number 3. Rule number 4, go with no expectations. This could be your neighbor. And your neighbor says, come over to my house for dinner. And you know that they come from a very hospitable culture. And for you to go to their house for dinner is the first sign of you saying, I love you and I want to become your friend. If you refuse their offer to come to their house for dinner, your ability to witness to them is probably done, because it starts over the meal. Jesus never turned down a meal. You guys know that? Jesus never turned down a meal. Almost every New Testament time of evangelism and connection happened around friendship and around food. So when we go with no expectations. When we walk into their house, don't think it's going to be like this, it's going to smell like this, it's going to taste like this, and they're going to say this to me. Just literally try to wash from your mind all of your expectations, because you may be in America, but you're walking into a Palestinian home. Or you're walking into a Buddhist home or a Hindu home. You're walking into their home. I can remember doing construction in Hacienda. And Hacienda Heights has the largest Buddhist temple in the Western Hemisphere. It's right here in Southern California. It's up there in the hills. And I go into this house to do air conditioning installation that day. We were giving them air conditioning. And as I walked in, I saw incense burning on the front porch. Now, being a young believer, I had no idea what Buddhism was like and why they burned incense. So as we walk in, and I'm with my 4 other crew members, which are all totally unsaved, drug addict partiers, right? It's the construction group. As we all walk in, Grandma is sitting in front of where the TV would normally be, but it's a picture of a Buddhist statue or a figure or whatever, and she's got incense burning, and she's bowing down to this thing. And all of us were like, what's going on here? This is crazy, right? You walk, we're in America, and somebody's bowing down to a statue. That was my first experience with it. I remember thinking I didn't expect that one bit. When I walk into unbelievers' homes, not American unbelievers, but international unbelievers, sometimes I'll walk in and there'll be 20 Hindu statues right next to the dinner table, and my kids are like, Dad, what's that wicked thing with all the arms and the teeth? It looks like a demon. I'm like, just don't look. Just don't look. And this one lady realized that we were looking at it. My kids didn't know what to do. And she had a little curtain, and she kind of closed it slowly during the meal. As she was like serving rice, she was like closing the curtain. Because my kids were like, what's happening around here? So we go in with no expectations. And we say, Lord, you've invited me into this home that I might be your ambassador to these people. So we never judge, right? We never judge. We always keep a straight face. We have no expectations. And what was our other rule? They'll never offend us on purpose. They'll always try to honor us. All right, that lays the groundwork for our class tonight. So these are culture shock experiences from my life. I'm not making these up. I'm not getting these from a book. These are all things that happened to me in the first couple years of doing missions. And these were those really quality moments where it was, Lord, I'm either in or I'm out, because this is absolutely shocking. All right, the first experience, and I entitled it, Did He Really Just Do That? Example number 1 of a culture shock moment. Our first time in an African church in a really remote village. We're sitting on these logs, which were the chairs, but they were just like logs. And you realize their logs are like this big, and after about 10 minutes, you feel like you have no more feeling in your bottom. You're used to big, padded, cushioned chairs, sometimes armrests. Isn't that a wonderful thing? You go into a church with an armrest. So we're sitting on these logs for how long? 2-3 hours at a time, because their services go on forever, because to them it's about being together, and they like to be together a lot. So they were sitting there. As the pastor's preaching, we've had some worship, we've had some prayer, we've had some announcements. Pastor gets up to preach. As he's preaching, he's holding the Bible, and all of a sudden his finger goes right up his nose. Now, he's picking his nose. Now notice this. I'm not picking my nose, so I'm not offending you guys, right? But he's really picking his nose. All I see is this. He's teaching and teaching and picking, and then he's down there, and then he's running, and then all of a sudden, we'll work on the other side. Right? I'm like, remember, straight face. He's not trying to offend me, right? Now you're responding, aren't you? Can you imagine? What in the world? Now, this is the man that's inviting us into his ministry so that we can help minister to the people in his community. He's picking his nose. I'm freaking out. Is he really doing that? He gets done with his hour-and-a-half message and tons of picking. He sits down and he says, we're going to have a testimony. And he had this one lady come up. This lady was part of my wife's Bible study. So we knew this lady. Her name was Olga. She had 5 kids. Her husband was killed in the war. She was extremely poor, but she wanted to share with the church about what Jesus was doing in her heart through this Bible study and the teaching of the Word. So she gets up and she's really nervous. She's not a pastor. She's not a public speaker. And in her nervousness, in America, we might, fiddle with our hands or put our hands in our pockets or whatever. She starts picking both. So she's double doing it the whole time. She's sitting there and she's just picking away and telling about Jesus and how much he loves us and all this stuff. And we're like, we're dying. Just pull your fingers out of your nose, please. This goes on forever. At the end of the service, the pastor goes out at the end of the church and he goes out to right outside the door and he stands there. And he says, Rob, you're our guest, so you come. And then I shake the pastor's hand and I stand next to the pastor. The next person shakes the pastor's hand, shakes my hand, stands next to me. At the end of this procession, which takes about 20 minutes, every person in the church has shaken every person's hand. And I'm thinking about all of the noses that I saw being moved around during that service. I'm looking at the little kids with the greens coming out. You guys know what I'm talking about? There's no tissue, there's no toilet paper, nothing like it. And then, about a month into this, I realized they don't have toilet paper. When they go to the bathroom, how do they wash their hands? You follow me on this? They don't have toilet paper. And I touched every person's hand, which has touched every other person's hand, which probably shook hands with their friends on the way to church. I've shooken over, literally, 500 hands this morning. And I'm feeling completely disgusted. Then the Lord reminds me, this took a little while, a couple months, maybe a year or so. The Lord reminds me, I lived just like they did when I was a man on the earth. Do you see Jesus with a bathroom, with a flushing toilet? Does he have running water, right? Does he have soap? At least the Jews knew how to wash and let the water drip off their elbows, but that was given to them by the book of Leviticus. They don't have soap, they don't have running water, they don't have toilet paper, and they don't have toilets. And I'm thinking, wow, Lord, if this was good enough for you, why is it not good enough for me? You see, I expected everybody to have the same culture that I have. And then I searched the Bible for, thou shalt not pick thy nose. Did I find it? Did I find it? Daniel, did I find it?
You say no.
You're going to say no, because it doesn't say it, does it? So is it wrong to pick your nose in God's eyes? So who's offended? Me. Anybody else offended? Just the Americans. Is God offended? Absolutely not. So then I have to come back to who taught me that? Who taught me not to pick my nose? My mom. So would I ever pick my nose at my mom's house? Absolutely not. There is no way. I can't even do it in front of you, even though I can do it in Africa because that's what they do and I try to be like them. I can't even put my fingers near my nose in front of you because it would be too offensive. So that's our first example. When we come back, we'll go for example number 2. I can't believe he just said that. Let's take a 5-minute break.